With the appearance of Null in Venom: The Last Dance, a much-discussed topic has resurfaced. Who would win in a possible and fair fight between Thor and Null? In the comics, the enmity between Null and Thor dates back to prehistoric times. First, I'll briefly touch on the history of Null and Thor. The All-Black the Necrosword created by Null was taken by Gore the God Butcher, who ended up becoming one of Thor's greatest enemies. He even managed to be the main villain in Thor: Love and Thunder. Gore the God Butcher, with just the powers of the Necrosword, wrecked Thor. Before that, during the fight between Thor and Grendel, Null completely lost the connection between himself and the symbiotes because of Thor. The lightning strike Thor delivered remotely harmed Knull, and the symbiotes rebelled against him and imprisoned him. So, one of the biggest reasons Null can't control the symbiotes right now is Thor. In the King in Black comic, when Null and Thor had a bloody battle, Null slashed Thor. But since what we're talking about wasn't exactly a fair fight, we need to assess both characters' strengths and weaknesses thoroughly. According to public opinion, can Null really beat Thor? Well, can he actually win? To find out the answer to that question, keep watching. But before we start, if you're new to the channel and don't want to miss the content, don't forget to subscribe and like the video. Let's start with Null first, because there are some details about him that need to be explained. In my opinion, Null is not as powerful as people think. The real source of Null's power is the symbiotes he claimed to have created. For example, when he first created All-Black the Necrosword, it was extremely powerful, and with it, he killed a celestial being. Later on, he fed the weapon with the cosmic energy that the celestial possessed and made it even stronger. In fact, All-Black the Necrosword, unlike the other symbiotes, was not affected by sound or fire. However, as the god of darkness, Null was creating symbiotes with matter he pulled from the living abyss dimension. If you recall, this detail was also shown in the Thor: Love and Thunder movie. Gore the God Butcher, thanks to All-Black the Necrosword, brought symbiotic creatures from the living abyss into the real world. What Null did was take these symbiotes and make them more intelligent and evolved. So when the symbiotes were in their primitive form, Null turned them all into intelligent beings. As you can understand, since Null generally loved darkness, he loved them too. He enhanced them and used some as weapons. Based on this detail, the main thing that gives Null his power is the symbiotes he uses. In other words, Null's specialty comes from creating and evolving symbiotes. If he's creating a symbiotic sword using cosmic energy drawn from a celestial being, that sword better slice through everyone. Even in the MCU, celestial beings have accomplished enormous feats, from creating black holes to forming entire galaxies. So, if Null is being weakened and imprisoned by the very symbiotes he created, what is it that makes this entity so terrifying? Null existed even before the beginning of the universe, meaning he has billions of years of experience and knowledge. If we accept that Thor is 1,500 years old, then Thor doesn't even count as a novice next to Null. So, as you can see, Null didn't spend his whole life in a prison. For billions of years, he committed massacres and used the symbiotes to conquer different planets. In fact, in his last battle, while wielding All-Black the Necrosword, he defeated an army of gods empowered by Enigma power, and approximately 1,000 years ago from today, he was imprisoned by his own symbiotes because of Thor. So right now, Null has been imprisoned for at most 1,000 years. The hive knowledge that the symbiotes accumulated over billions of years was monitored by Null. Since he possesses an entirely different level of intelligence and experience, even though Thor's abilities are impressive, he does not have the same level of experience as Null. While Null was connected to a dimension called the Living Abyss, the only thing in the universe that could stop him was the Enigma power. That's because the Living Abyss, which we call the Living Void, and the powers of Captain Universe are opposite energies. One represents darkness, and the other represents light. Therefore, when Venom became Captain Universe, he managed to destroy Null with his own power. Symbiotes were primitive beings coming from a dimension called the Living Abyss. In the film Thor: Love and Thunder, Gore the God Butcher showed us their purest and most primitive forms. The reason symbiotes fear Null is actually this, because if Null truly wished, he could create one much stronger and bigger than all of them. Actually, whether this can be exactly called creation is also debatable, friends, because taking an already existing material and reshaping it, adding intelligence and developing it, is more like reshaping than creating. So technically, The character we call Null is not in the same league as Thor. Null's existence posed a direct threat to eternity. In fact, Null's greatest battle was the struggle against eternity. Is Thor currently a character in the eternity class? Of course not. In fact, no celestial being or god in the universe can be in the eternity class. Therefore, those who say Null is stronger than Thor aren't exactly wrong. Right now, while Null possesses the powers to plunge the entire universe into darkness, if the Enigma power didn't exist, he could never have been stopped. Another detail I want to touch on here is this. According to many sites, it is written that Null defeated the Herald of Non-Thor. However, this is an extremely incorrect statement. Null did not defeat the Herald of Non-Thor. Null only defeated King Thor, who was using the Odin Force. The Herald of Non-Thor we're talking about was a character who soloed Black Winter, and with the energy inside him, he could have destroyed Null as well. In fact, since Thor used all of that energy to defeat Black Winter, he was no longer as strong as he was in his Herald of Non form. But what is definitely a fact is that a being who soloed Black Winter is absolutely superior to Null. So, comparing Black Winter, who destroyed universes and multiversal cycles, with Null is absolutely irrational. This is also why those who believe Rune King Thor is stronger than Herald of Non-Thor are right, because when all the energy inside him is depleted, the Herald of Non-Thor won't have much left. Along with this, it's also correct to say that Rune King Thor could defeat Null. However, if we're talking about his other forms, Thor's godly powers, meaning the light within him, need to be revealed in order to stop Null. Otherwise, even Thor definitely cannot be equal to Null. Null was a character who regenerated and healed quickly when he took damage. This was already one of the biggest features of symbiotes. If you remember in the MCU, during the battle in the Living Abyss, Thor knew he could defeat Gore with the weapons of the gods. In fact, during this battle, he almost tore apart both All Black and Gore. So in the MCU too, if Thor had become a bit stronger, he would very likely have reached the level to defeat Null. He was already nearly tearing Gore apart. But since Null is potentially far superior to Gore, Thor will need to become even stronger. That's why, based on current circumstances, and if we speak in terms of base forms both in the MCU and in the comics, Null is definitely much stronger than Thor. Also, in the video, I had said that only the Enigma power, meaning Captain Universe's powers, could stop Null. But Null, who wielded the all-black the Necrosword, fought against thousands of golden-armored gods enhanced with Enigma power and killed them all. In the end, after injuring each other with one of them and crashing onto a planet, he lost the all-black the Necrosword but was still alive. So, when we look at it from this perspective, Null using the all-black the Necrosword would truly be an unstoppable entity in the MCU. When we look at the comics, even 3 Thors couldn't defeat Gore, who was using the all-black the Necrosword, and if we consider that Null uses this weapon, not even 10 of them would stand a chance. When evaluating the character of Null, don't forget, friends, that there is only one Null in the multiverse. Even gods who used energy opposite to Null's existence could do nothing when he held the all-black the Necrosword. When we look at Thor, unfortunately, he falls very short in this regard. Speaking of his highest and most powerful forms, he must gain extra powers to reach them. Even a character like Venom, who possesses hive knowledge across the multiverse, fears Null, so this character must not be wasted in the MCU. Looking at the most powerful forms again, as I said, Herald of Non-Thor and Rune King Thor would already destroy Null. But as I said, in base forms, Null would definitely be the winner. Looking at the MCU, Thor barely managed to deal with Gore, so when the real Master of the Realm shows up, there's no way he could stop him. So, in conclusion, yes, Null is not as strong as believed, but he could be much stronger than people think. Yes, friends. I hope you liked the content I've prepared. If there are other videos you'd like to see, don't forget to write them in the comments. That's all from me for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye.